Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be making the ultimate office bag, and this bag has a whole lot of features, trust me. So first we're going to place the front panel wrong side up, and then we'll use the interfacing to draw a 3-4 inch line on the top and then the side edges. Now we're going to fuse or glue that interfacing on the wrong side of the front panel, right? As I am doing right now. Then we're going to fold the inner cuff to cover the interfacing. Now we're not folding it to meet the edge of the interfacing like we usually do. We're folding this to cover the interfacing because the interfacing is going to be in the seam allowance, because the seam there is not going to be too thick. It's just that and then zipper later. Okay, so we're going to also center the front cover interfacing on the front cover panel, and then we're going to use glue or double-sided tape to fold the long edges, the cornered long edge now, and then the side edges to cover the interfacing as well. Again, the interfacing is going to be in the seam allowance. So you cover it like this. You can use your DST, double-sided tape. You can use glue as well. So we're going to repeat this same thing for the lining panel, for the front lining panel, for the front cover. Yeah, so we're going to do the same thing for it, and then we separate our zipper by the teeth, our 22-inch zipper, and then we're going to set one half of it on the front cover exterior. Is going to be right side to the right side of the front cover exterior, as I am doing right now. Please make sure that the zip itself does not go too close to the front cover. The teeth of the zip doesn't go too close to the front cover exterior. So once it's in place like this, we're going to cover the lining on the wrong side. It's going to be the lining plus the exterior wrong sides together like this. So again, you can use your double-sided tape, and then you can use your glue depending on what you have. Because after now we're going to sew it anyway, so it's not going to matter if you're using glue or double-sided tape. So we're going to take this to the sewing machine, and then we'll sew around that edge. Again, I'm going to take the other half of the zipper, and then I will also tape it on the front panel like so. So the right side of the zipper is going to the right side of the front panel. So you can use your scissors to notch it a little. Let the notch be very, very tiny. So we tape it like that. And of course, you can use your double-sided tape here to tape it. And don't forget, the teeth of the zip should not get too close to the edge of that cuff. Shouldn't get too close. We need a bit of space. Then we're also going to sew that with 1/8 inch seam allowance. You see, we are sewing the front cover first with 1/8 inch seam allowance. And then we'll also sew the front panel, 1/8 inch seam allowance as well. So once this is done, we're going to take zipper, right? A zipper pull, and use it to secure the two half of the zipper tapes together, as I am doing right now. So you want to make sure that it is centered and well placed. It has to be correct. So I'm going to get it all the way to the end first, right? Once I get it all the way to the end, I will remove it and get it to the center, right? I'm doing that because I want it to be at the center, so that when I'm sewing, I'm able to like sew the bottom edge. So this is what it looks like at this point. Then we'll move to step 2. So this is where we do the back panel, the laptop pocket and everything. So first we're going to draw a 3-4 inch line on the short edges of the laptop pocket trim, and then we'll fold the short edges to meet that line, and then we sew it with 1/4 inch seam allowance to secure what we just folded. Now we're going to fold the panel wrong sides together, matching the long edges, and then we clip it in place. We take this to the sewing machine and sew with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. So once we are done with the sewing, we're going to take the laptop, the upper back panel now, and then we're going to hold the raw edge of the laptop pocket trim right sides together with the longest edge of the upper back panel, and of course we'll center it and then sew with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Now we'll divide our 16-inch zipper by the teeth, and then we set it on the same edge we have been working with, and also sew it with another 1/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, so we're going to take the laptop pocket, one of the laptop pockets now, and then we're going to hold the one of the longer edge right sides together with the edge we have been working with. We clip it together and then we sew it with 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now all of these steps can be a bit confusing in the video because we are sewing too many things on just one seam, but it is much more clearer inside the pattern because all the pictures are aligned and clearly presented. So we're going to open these panels, and then the laptop pocket is down, the zip is down, the top trim, the laptop pocket trim is also down. Then we are going to be top stitching. The seams are going to the upper back panel, and then we'll top stitch with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Now we're going to take the lower back panel and center the interfacing on the we're going to center it on it and then fuse it in place. Now we're going to take the second half of the zipper panel and hold it right sides together with the top edge of the lower back panel, and then we sew with 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now we're going to take the second laptop pocket and then hold it right sides together with this panel we are working with. And then we're going to sew that with a 1/4 inch seam allowance as well. Now we'll open this panel, right? And then they're going to be wrong sides together, and then we top stitch with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. So this is what we have at this point. And then we're going to take a zipper pull now, right? This is what we have. We're going to take a zipper pull and then aligning the top, the upper back panel and the lower back panel. Now we're going to use the zipper pull to join it together. Again, I want to get it to the center because it being at the center will make sewing the side edges easier later. So the zipper pull is now at the center, right? And then we are done with this step. Oh, sorry, we're not done with this step yet. We have to fuse our back. We have to fuse our interfacing, or even before that, we're going to draw a 3/4 inch line on the top of the upper back panel, and then we're going to set the back interfacing on that line. We're going to center it on that line and use it to draw where to cut the laptop pocket, because at this point we can see that the laptop pocket is really big, like way too big for what we actually need. So we're going to place it like so, and then draw. See the way I'm tracing out the line with the back interfacing. And then we're going to take this with the sewing machine, and then we'll sew 1/8 inch seam allowance from that line. So I'm using clips to hold it because there's a way I want it to stay. I want it to stay the way it won't be rough or anything by the time I'm done with the sewing. So 1/8 inch inside the line now, not outside the line. 1/8 inch inside the line. 1/8 inch to the line, but inside, not outside. Again, this is clearer in the video, in the pattern. So we sew 1/8 inch to the line inside, so that we can cut on that line later and our stitches will still be intact on the laptop pocket. So we're going to trim this. We'll trim this out. We'll trim on that line, on the line we drew using our back interfacing. We're trimming on that line. Remember, the stitches is inside 1/8 inch inside the line. So by the time you finish trimming, you're going to have a seam allowance that is 1/8, right? A seam allowance that is 1/8 to the edge of the laptop pocket. So we're doing all of this because we don't want the laptop pocket to get to be inside the seam allowance. We don't want things to be too thick by the time we are having our final stitches. So this is it. This is what the back panel looks like at this point. And then we're going to take our back panel now and then interface it with the back interfacing. So now, moving on to the base interfacing. We're going to draw, on the wrong side of the base interfacing, we're going to draw a 3/8 inch line on the long edge, the long edges. And then center your base interfacing on the wrong side of the base panel. So you can use glue or you can fuse it in place. So now we're going to draw 3-inch line from the short edge, from the short edges now, 3-inch line. Then we're going to draw 1.5-inch lines from the long edges. And of course, we're going to draw a line at the center because we want it to have 6 purse fits. So, and then we will install our purse fit where these lines intersect. So this is what we have after we're done with that. So this is the base panel, and then we move along and clip the one long edge of the base panel with the long edge, or the bottom edge now, the bottom edge of the back panel, right sides together. We clip them and then sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Now we'll open the seam and top stitch on the base panel with 1/8 inch seam allowance. Then we'll repeat the same thing for the front panel and the other long edge of the base panel. Now we're going to fold the edges to meet the edge of the interfacing. You can use double-sided tape or your glue at this point. Now note that the interfacing will not be in the seam allowance. It's going to be to the edge of the interfacing, as I am doing right now. Okay, so we move to the next step where we do the invisible connector. So we're going to draw a line down the center of the long edge of the invisible connector, and then we'll fold the long edges to meet that line. Then we're going to take the base panel now, and then we fuse the side interfacing You can fuse, you can either fuse or glue it. So this is it. And then we're going to mark where the invisible connector will go to using pattern piece D. So you cut that line. And then we're going to push our invisible connector through that line, wrong side up, and then we sew it with 1/8 inch seam allowance. Put your D-ring and push the other raw edge through the line and use your rivet to hold it in place. Okay, now we're going to repeat the same step for the second side panel and the second invisible connector. So moving on, we are going to fold the bottom corner of the side panel and then we sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. We're going to do this for the two side panels and then the two lower side lining. So this is it. And then we're going to trim the fold without cutting into the stitches. Cut the fold without cutting into the stitches. Then we open that up and use double-sided tape or glue to hold it down. Okay, so this is it. This is the lower side lining. We're going to fold the edge of the side panel to meet the edge of the interfacing. Again, the interfacing is not going to be in the seam allowance. Okay, so this is the final look, and then moving on to the divider panel, we're going to insert our zipper pull onto the 11 inches zipper tape, and then we take the zipper tab and we draw a line down the center. We're going to fold the edges to meet that line. You can either press it or use double-sided tape to hold it depending on the material you're using. And then we're going to insert the short edges of this zipper panel into that fold. Then we're going to sew these with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. So we're going to cut the excess zipper tab away. And then we're going to mark the center of the divider panel on the short edge, on the short straight edge. I'm going to mark the center, and we're also going to mark the center of the zipper panel, the zipper tape. We're going to hold it right sides together. Right sides together, we're going to hold the zipper tape right sides together and centered on one short edge of the divider panel. And then we sew with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Then take the second divider panel and hold it right sides together with the one you're working with. We'll sew that edge with 1/4 inch seam allowance. Then open the panels and then top stitch with 1/8 inch seam allowance. Then we'll repeat the same thing for the other side, the other short edge of the divider panel. Now turn the panel to the right side. At this point, we are supposed to top stitch the second side of the zipper panel, but the panel is actually too small to top stitch, so I'm just going to leave it like that and press it in place. So we're going to take the upper side lining and then mark or draw a 1/2 inch line on one short edge. That short edge is going to become the bottom edge of the upper side lining. So we're going to match that line, that 1/2 inch line, to the bottom edge of the divider panel, right sides together with one side of the divider panel. And then we'll use another upper side lining, right sides together with the first one, and then we'll clip in place. Now sew this with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And then open the panels and top stitch. Open the panels and also open the seams. Then top stitch 1/8 inch to the side edge of the divider panel. Draw a 1/2 inch line on one long edge of the demarcating panel on the wrong side, and then center the demarcating panel on that line. You're going to fold the other long edge to the long edges together now. Fold the long edges together, and it has to be glued together, or you can use double-sided tape as well. Now hold the short edges of the demarcating panel right sides together with the bottom edge of the upper side lining and clip them in place. So sew that with 1/4 inch similar ones. So also hold the short edge of the demarcating panel now with the top edge of the lower side lining, so that the demarcating panel is sandwiched between the upper and the lower side lining, and then clip them in place. Now sew together with a 3/8 inch similar ones, and then top stitch it on the lower, top stitch the seam on the lower side lining. Now we are going to the slip pocket. Now take the slip pocket panel and fold the short edges, the long edges, right sides together, and then sew it with 1/4 inch seam allowance on the sides. Leave the top edge for now. Do not sew the top edge because we are going to turn through that line, through that open space. So now turn it to the right side. Now fold the slip pocket trim to cover the raw edge of the slip pockets, and then sew it with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Then trim the excess away. Now we're going to lay the lining panel right side up and align the top edge of the slip pocket right side up and centered 1 inch from the top, and then we sew the sides and bottom edge with a 1/8 inch seam allowance, like so. Now we're doing the main zipper panel. Then we're going to take the the two zipper panel and draw a 1/2 inch line on the two short edges. Then we'll fold those lines to meet those edges to meet the lines using double-sided tape or glue. I want to note the edge, notch the center. I'm going to notch the center. Then I will take my 16-inch zipper tape, and then I'm going to draw a half-inch line, half-inch mark now from the starting end, and then I'm going to pin this zipper at the marked line and fold it at angle 90 degrees. I'll clip this in place and sew or baste. Now I'm going to lay the zipper panel right side up and align it to the folded edge of the zipper panel. Then I'll clip it in place. Now we sew this with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Now we're going to fold the zipper tape in half, right sides together, align it to the short edges, then we clip it in place again, and then sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now open the panels to the right side and clip it in place. Then top stitch with starting from one short edge across the long edge with the zipper and to the other short edge with 1/8 inch seam allowance. Also sew close the raw edges, also with 1/8 inch seam allowance. So this is it, and we're going to repeat the same thing to complete the other long edge of the zipper tape with the remaining zipper panel. Now draw a line 3/4 inch up from one long edge of the top trim, and then fold the edge to meet that line using double-sided tape or glue. Now match the long raw edge of the top trim panel together with the long raw edge of the zipper panel, right sides together and centered. Now you must have divide your zipper by the teeth like I just did now, so that your zipper panel is like into two. So now sew it with 1/8 inch seam allowance. And then after sewing that, we're going to repeat the same thing for the second top trim panel and the remaining zipper panel. Now match the top edge of one of the lining panels right sides together with the long raw edge of one of the top trim panels. Then clip them in place and sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Now push the seam towards the top trim panel and top stitch with 1/8 inch seam allowance on the top trim. Now we're going to repeat the same step for the remaining panels, and we have two of it like so. So we're going to the lining panels, and we're going to draw a 7-inch line from the top edge of the back panel like so. Now we're going to lay the short straight edge of the lower lining panel aligned on that line and centered. You can use glue or double-sided tape to hold it in place like so. Now sew the two sides of the front corner, the front cover and the bottom of the front cover, and follow the existing stitches as I am doing right now. So we are sewing that side, the side of the front cover, and then the bottom of it to secure the lining, the lower lining in place. Also, if you're not using a strong glue, you can also sew the side of the main panel itself with 1/4 inch seam allowance, so that when you are trimming, you can trim down to 1/8 inch seam allowance. But if you're using a strong glue like me, you can just trim it down in a way that the lining is not showing from the right side. So we also trim down the curved edges, also up to 1/8, trim it down up to 1/8 inch seam allowance, so that it will not show from the right side. This is why we need a non-fraying material for the lining panel of this bag. So now this is what we have. You can see it's not showing from the right side at all. It's also not showing from the zipper aspects. So now we're going to take the demarcating panel and match it right sides together with the bottom edge of one lining panel and centered. Clip them in place. Take this to the sewing machine and then sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, we're going to do the steps for the two lining panels and the two long edges of the demarcating panels, and then top stitch the seams on the lining panel. Now we're going to glue the side panel to the side lining, wrong sides together using glue or double-sided tape. Then we'll sew the top edge of the side panel with 1/8 inch seam allowance. And if you're not using a strong glue, please sew the side and bottom edge with 1/4 inch seam allowance so that you can trim the lining down to 1/8 inch seam allowance later. So I'm trimming now. I didn't have to like sew the side edges and the bottom edges because I used a strong glue. It's not going to remove. So now trim it down in a way that it doesn't show from the right side. Okay, so this is it. It's all done. It's not showing from the right side at all. And this is what our lining panel looks like up till now. So we're going to align the top trim of the lining panel that has the zipper pocket now, wrong sides together with the top edge of the back main panel and centered. Then you use glue or double-sided tape and even clips to hold it in place, as I am doing right now. Then we'll go ahead and also repeat this step for the other lining panel, right? The other lining panel and the top edge of the front main panel. And of course, wrong sides together and centered as well. Okay, so do not sew the top edges yet, but if you're not using a strong glue, please sew the side edges with 1/4 inch seam allowance so that you can trim it down to 1/8 inch seam allowance. But if you're using a strong glue, there's no need for the sewing, just trim down so that it is not showing from the right side. So just trim it down so that everything is nice and good. From the right side or from the exterior side now, sew the top of the front cover on the stitching stitches. That is to hold that lining so that when you open the lunch area of the bag, the lunch box or the lunch compartment of the bag, everything will be tight and smooth. So now we move to the handle panel, and then we'll draw a line down the center of the long edge of the handle panel and fold the long edges to meet that line. You can use glue or double-sided tape to hold it down as you are doing so. Then we'll fold the long edges wrong sides together, and then we'll clip them in place. I will take this to the sewing machine, and then we'll sew with 1/8 inch seam allowance. Now we're going to push a 14-inch tube through the sewn handle to the center to give it a professional rolled handle look. So this is it. We repeat it for the second handle panel. And then to fix our handle panel on the bag now, we're going to measure 4.25 inch from the two side edges on the top, and then we're going to set our handle in between the main panel and the top trim, and then we'll use clip to hold that in place. So you're going to push the handle in up till where you have that tube. You can cut about like excess away, but that is not very necessary. So all you have to do is push your handle in between the main panel and the top trim up to where you have your tube. So we're going to take this to the sewing machine and then sew with 1/8 inch seam allowance on the top edge. So now we're going to assemble the whole bag, and then we'll match the exterior together with the side panel, wrong sides together, and then we'll clip it in place. So you can start by matching the bottom center of the main panel with the side panel, and then we match the top edges and then the center in between to make it even more accurate. Now take this to the sewing machine and sew around the entire side edge with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. And then of course we repeat the same thing for the other side panel and the other side edge of the bag. So this is the final look. And then right now we are going to install our zipper pull. And also we'll install the zipper end to secure the end of the zipper. So this is it. We are here now and we're going to proceed to our tassel. So for the tassel panel, draw an horizontal line on one edge, half inch, it should be half inch, and then we're going to draw a vertical line from that horizontal line, 1/4 inch. Now these vertical lines will run from one end to the other end, like I'm doing right now. Then I'm going to use a sharp scissors to cut the vertical lines and stop at the horizontal line to form a fringe. So this is it. And I'm going to take the tassel holder, wrong sides together, and then match the long edges and clip it in place. I'm going to sew it with a 1/4 inch seam allowance and trim it up to 1/8 inch seam allowance. So it will look like this. And then I'll use a small dab of glue to hold one short edge of the tassel holder to the top edge of the tassel on the wrong side. Then I'm going to also use glue on the wrong side on that first horizontal line and then roll it into a tassel. So it's going to look like this. And then I will wrap the tassel holder on one handle panel. Then I will bring the other short edge and then use rivet to secure it in place. So I'm going to use rivet to secure it in place. This one is too thick, so I'm just going to use super glue. So the super glue actually held it well. So we're moving to the long strap panel, and after interfacing the long strap panel, the long strap connector with its interfacing, I'm going to fold the raw edge of the strap connector to cover the edge of the interfacing. I'm going to do this for the two strap connector and the two strap connector interfacing. Now slide one strap connector onto a swivel hook. Then I'll repeat the same thing for the other strap connector. Slide one short edge of the webbing into the strap connector and sew it in place. Then slide the other free end through the center bar of the slider and also slide in a square ring. Now thread the end you're working with over and through the center bar of the slider again. It should be beneath one you threaded before. And then hold it wrong sides together and then sew with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. So this is it. And then we're going to, this is what we have up to this point. Now we're going to take our connector holder and then we'll draw a line down the center, and then we'll fold the edges to meet that line. Now we're going to hold these wrong sides together on the square ring, then use the second, you're going to use the second slider, the second strap connector now, to cover the raw edge in place like so. Then you hold it and then sew it with 1/8 inch seam allowance. That is our complete strap. It is adjustable, and install it onto your bag. Thank you for watching. Bye.